Okay, good. Are we ready?
All right. Yep. You are good to go.
Good, thank you. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome again to the meeting of the Forest Drive Eastport Task Force. It has a more formal name, but I'm going to paraphrase it. This is a follow-up, of course, to the last meeting. And we have essentially one agenda item tonight that I'm aware of, unless others have something they want to add. But the primary purpose of tonight, you will recall that at our last meeting, we had a lot of discussion about how to essentially reach consensus by members of this task force on the draft report. And to refresh everybody's recollections, you recall that when we first started pre-COVID, we actually met in person. We divided up into 4 work groups that took a number of different topics per work group and then submitted reports from those work groups as to what they believe, each work group, what they believe to be important issues to address relative to the draft sector study. Those were then compiled into a very rough draft report, trying to capture what we could out of the reports that came again out of each one of these work groups. So at the last meeting, we saw that compilation, and the question was to all of us, how were we going to now distill this down into the essence of the report to not only capture what people saw as things that should have been added to the sector study, but also maybe some things that were not addressed at all that needed to be included. So there was discussions from all of our work groups along those lines. We agreed at the end of the last meeting that we would try to do this in the form of and I'm going to use the term matrix. I'm not sure that's the correct term, but what it's describing is a interactive document that we posted, that we will post and is posted now in the group Google Drive folder for the task force. And I want to just take a minute and give credit and a lot of thanks to Camille, Sally, Claire, and Lily, who did the yeoman's work on this. And between the last meeting and tonight, they've developed the outline of the matrix. They're going to explain this in much more detail tonight. And the primary purpose of our meeting tonight is to hear their presentation on this product and be able to ask questions, clarify as to how this is going to be used. And then it's going to be the responsibility of each one of us on the task force to go into this document and respond to each of the elements regarding the issues, whether you agree, whether you disagree, whether you need more information, and so forth. So it will become an active working spreadsheet, if you will, that we hope will capture the sense of the task force. The only other thing I want to say before I turn this over literally to the 4 people who worked on this is that this meeting and the last meeting, we were sponsored by the city, and we're going to have another meeting, I believe the first week of October. I don't have that date in front of me, but we'll publish it. There are reserved dates that the city has given us. Sally was able to reserve some dates so we could do this by Zoom and on YouTube on the city website. But you will have an opportunity, and I will probably circulate a date somewhere in the next 2 weeks for all of you to participate so that we can take a look at where we are with this matrix. We're going to need to do that, in my opinion, not wait a month but take a look at it much sooner. And we'll try to set that up as kind of a side work group exercise. So with that, unless there are any immediate questions on what I've said, let me turn this over to Claire, Sally, Camille, and Lily. Thanks. Whoever wants to go next. Or I can pick on you. Go ahead, Camille.
Oh, geez. Okay.
All right, Patrick, go ahead.
All right. We've been working on this thing for a really long time, and the different work groups had come up with recommendations, and we really needed to make sure before we go any further whether we are really addressing all of the issues that we need to address, and that all of the recommendations that everyone has brought to our attention is in the final document. So this chart of sorts is just a simplified way for all of the task force to take a look at the recommendations and see whether they agree, disagree, whether you need more information before you can agree or disagree, so that we know how to proceed going forward. And this is not by any means the final, this is not what we're going to be presenting to the City Council. This is strictly a working document for the task force so that we get feedback from those of you that have been really active and have been included in all of these meetings. Otherwise, you know, we're not sure whether we're touching base with everything that we need to do. So that's all I've got, but I'm sure the rest of you guys have got stuff to say.
Okay.
This document,
So I think it would help if one of us shared the document on the screen so people could see it.
Can one of you screen share that so that everybody can see it and kind of walk us through it?
Sally, do you have the
Ryan,
latest?
how do I do that with share content, Ryan? I think that must be how I do it. Okay, yeah, let me work on that. It'll just take me a minute.
So while Sally is doing that, I think what I would add to what has already been said is that this matrix allows us to kind of take the temperature of the whole entire task force, those of us who have been engaged the whole time, as well as maybe those that haven't been able to make every meeting, and make sure we actually are transparent in confirming that all members of the task force actually do approve of every single recommendation. So I think that was the intent of this. Patrick, did you have a question?
yeah, I was going to bring up too. At the last meeting, and this is a little bit off topic. We're getting into the matrix now, and I don't want to derail that. Lily had asked if I could give a presentation at some point on the county's peninsula policy area, and that's a part of their plan, of our Plan 2040 update. And I don't know if you want to. Do you want to maybe do that at the end, since we're sort of into this now?
Yes, can we do that? We're going to have time, Patrick, because you know, this meeting I would expect would go about an hour, and
I'll be quick.
And I think that's fine. But yes, let's reserve that time for you at the end. And for starters, let's go ahead and see if we can get through this.
Yeah, great.
I think what we're trying to do now, and again, it's a technical issue, is figure out how to share the screen. I'm just going to take a stab at it and see if I can do that. And I can't. Okay. Yeah, it doesn't let me. It doesn't.
On my end, I do have it so that all panelists are allowed to share their screen.
Can you put that up then?
If I'm emailed the attachment, I certainly can, yes.
Do you have the attachment?
I do not believe so.
Sally can send it to you. If
Okay, great.
she's still online. Sally, do you have that in an Excel document?
Can you all see my screen?
There we go.
Yes,
There it
Yes.
is.
I see it.
Okay, great. Okay.
Yep.
And
All right, good job, Claire.
Yeah, I know. How did you do it?
okay. So before we lose it, can either Claire or Camille just walk us through this? And this is the matrix that you will see and have access to in the Google Drive folder under reports. Okay. So everybody should have access to this. Go ahead.
So the way this is oriented is that each of our recommendations for each work group is a column. So they're in order of how we numbered our work groups. So I'm not going to read every one, but you can see for work group 1, we have several of the recommendations, and then work group 2, and then work group 3, and then work group 4. And then we have some additional recommendations that came out that were not necessarily tied to any of the work groups. So that's how it's oriented by column. And then for all of us who are on the task force, we are all listed in the first 2 columns. The second column is our name and what ward we represent. And then I think the first column, correct me if I'm wrong, Sally, was which work group we were in. So for those who are on here that may not have their work group assigned, we'll get that filled in. And then each cell is, each person would be expected to vote on whether they agree, disagree, need more information, or abstain. So you'll notice there's little carrots in each cell. So you can just click on whether you agree, disagree, need more information, or abstain. And we do recognize, based on the last meeting we had, that some of our city, county, or state task force members may feel like they have to abstain in certain areas. So we made sure we were able to capture that. And so maybe I could ask Camille, because Camille has actually filled this in. Camille, could you walk people through how you went about doing this?
Sure. I mean, before Claire was in all her technical knowledge, before she gave us that little drop down, I just typed in the letter basically. And, you know, as I was going through this, I wanted to make sure that the recommendations as they were worded matched the document that we had at our last task force meeting. Today we had a conversation with a subcommittee group of us, and it was brought up that we need to be sure that the recommendations that we have are addressing all of those issues that were brought up through all of the meetings that we had, you know, before COVID, when we had other big, huge groups of people that were there at those meetings. We came together and put a list of what we considered to be all of the known issues that people had with the existing Eastport Forest Drive sector study. And so Lily took the time to take a look at this list, and she compared it to the recommendations that we have here in this matrix. And we realize that there are still some issues that none of the subgroups have addressed yet. So the first step is to get everybody's feedback on what we have here. And then probably the next step is to see those issues that we have not yet addressed that were brought up throughout many of the meetings that we had. So it's really important that we get everybody's feedback, at least on this first round, to make sure that we're going in the right direction. I mean, verbally, people have said, yeah, it's okay. But now we're really cutting to the chase. Now it's, yes, no, maybe, what have you. So we really want everybody's feedback. And Bill, I don't know how soon you wanted everybody to complete this form, how many days you're going to give people to do it before we can take a look at the results.
I'm going to recommend to the group that this be done in 2 weeks. I think that's a reasonable amount of time. It's a very intuitive, interactive document. It's very simple. Read the recommendation, indicate whether you agree, disagree, abstain, or you think you need more information. As I said earlier, I would like to have a work group meeting open to all task force members within about 2 weeks to take a look at how this is developing. So within 2 weeks, we should see everybody having participated. And I'll send out an email probably tomorrow morning to everybody. We have 13 people. As of now, we have 13 people in the task force participating in this meeting, which is certainly a majority of the 21. So I'm going to recommend 2 weeks, folks. So what you need to do is not only know how to use it, which we're going through today, but you need to know how to access it. So I'm asking everybody to at least try to access this by tomorrow. And let us know early. You can send me an email if you are having trouble accessing the document in the Google Drive that we set up earlier. Okay, you would look for it in the reports folder in the Google Drive general folder that we set up. While I'm thinking about it, Camille and Claire, let me ask a question. The drop-down box is really cool. It's hit the little drop-down indicator and it gives you agree, disagree, and so forth. Mm-hmm. And there's an example. If you want more information and you indicate that you need more information, is there space in that cell for a few words indicating what kind of information or expounding on that? Is that possible?
Yeah.
Yeah, people should be able to just type in the cell.
Yeah, Claire's doing it.
Okay. Yeah, there we go. So there's an example.
Yes, yes, you can.
And it looks like you can, without getting too verbose, you can write a sentence, you can.
Right. It should just wrap.
Okay. Okay, great. So when you're using this, folks, if you, and let's say need more information, put down here, what kind of information? What is it that you think we need that we don't have or need to understand? And that's really going to inform this process and give us the opportunity to get that information. And let me just want to say, and I'm going to ask anybody to help out with this part of it. As Claire said, there were people who indicated they may feel they have to abstain from taking a position, either agreed or disagreed on some of the recommendations. Okay, and we understand historically from our discussions, we understand the reasons for that. But I think for purposes of really a complete understanding, if you feel comfortable in writing some basis for that abstention, go ahead and do it. I mean, don't be afraid to do that so that we can see what the basis is. And and understand that more clearly. Okay. Does anybody have a question for Claire, Camille, or anyone about how to use this and why we're doing it, or any of the above? Anybody have a question? Since I can't see you all, you can.
None on my side.
Go ahead, Brooks.
I have none. It's
Okay.
a pretty good system.
Okay.
Camille and Claire, thanks for putting this together.
Yeah, they did a terrific job on this.
I have one thing I would say. This is Patrick. If you can't see me, in the Google Drive, I would be careful. There are two matrices that are in there. One, actually, maybe three. There's an Excel version and a Google Sheets version, and then it looks like, I don't know if that was maybe a survey, Claire, that maybe you had set up at one point. It would be, just to avoid confusion, I don't know if we want to label, it looks like everybody right now is in the Google Sheets version, and just for clarity and consistency, it would be best if we somehow make sure that everybody goes into that one and not into either of the other ones, so that we're all looking at the same thing.
Good.
Yeah, I made the Excel one because we were worried people would have trouble getting on the Google Sheets, depending on what device you're in. But
So some may need that. Okay.
I don't know. I think you might be right that it maybe causes more confusion than it helps. So
Going off of experience here,
Yeah.
and having
Yeah.
confused
I could
people.
delete that if people, is that okay with everyone, or does anyone need the Excel version?
Well, let's just have one that is clearly identified as the one to work on. So how do we do that without confusion? Should we delete this one and then rename the operative one by today's date?
Sure. One thing, Sally, you could do, if you want to keep that Excel version, you could create, say, an archive folder within this and just dump it in there. And that way it's not front and center, but you still have it if you need to go back to it.
That's a good idea.
But we also have to consider that there's some like, and hi everyone, this is Martha. Consider those who are unable to work on Google, like the state. So SHA, I don't know if Michelle is on the feed, but SHA is not allowed to get on these Google platforms.
Okay.
So therefore, having the ability to receive the Excel file is going to be very important for them. So just keep that in mind for those who are unable to.
So then that's fine. That's good to know, because that means that we'll have to tally up the responses from both an Excel document that's going to have to be emailed to someone, either Bill, you know, the Excel sheets have to be emailed to you or to somebody, so that can be a part of the final review.
That's fine. Martha, does the county have a similar restriction, or is it just the state, if you know?
It's just the state. The state is the state can only work from Microsoft Office platform.
Okay. So
Hi, Martha. This is Michelle.
Oh, hi, Michelle. I'm not sure if Michelle's on here, but yeah.
Okay.
I was figuring out
Michelle, how do you want to handle this?
So yeah, the state, we're not allowed to, I'm participating by call-in as well right now, because we're not able to use Zoom and some of these other platforms that other agencies have been using. But I have been coordinating with, Sally and Martha and Esther and the folks involved that do have access. So I agree also, though, that it should be made available to other entities or people that might not have access to Google, just generally, so it's open for public input.
So Bill, when this goes out, then the email should include instructions for those that can access it via Google Docs, and then those that will use the attachment with it being an Excel document.
So let me ask, at this point, Michelle, as a member of the task force from the state, are you able to submit responses on a spreadsheet?
If there's an attached spreadsheet, then like Sally's saying, I would be able to fill out that attached spreadsheet and return it to whoever's the designated person to receive that.
Why don't you send it to me and then I'm going to post it. And this is the question, the second part of the question. Ideally, want to post that to the Google Drive folder so everybody can see your response. Okay, is that a problem?
That's fine.
Okay.
No, that's fine.
All right.
Yeah, I
Okay.
just can't get into Google myself. So it's fine to post it on there.
Okay. This document at this stage is not, is only available. I mean, anybody can watch this YouTube, I suppose. It's open, but the document input is only open to the task force members at this point. Nobody else puts comments on this document, okay? So that we can do what we need to do, which is consolidate and see where we are and move forward with this report. Okay, any other questions or comments about the matrix?
So Bill, just one comment that if people want to provide information about their vote or something else that they think should be changed, they just have to write it in as text. You can either pick the things in the drop down or you can write. You can't do both. So for the people that abstain, if they need to write something about it, they should just write abstain and then why they're abstaining.
Yes, but they should,
Okay.
for any answer, you should say, I agree. And if you want to write something. Disagree, right?
If you need to write something, you just have to put your full text in. I can't, if you pick agree, then that's what's in the cell.
Gotcha. But you should indicate if you agree that you agree. Okay.
Yes,
Don't write a paragraph and then we're trying to wonder whether you agree or not.
correct.
Okay. All right. Anybody need any more on how to use it or what it's for? Great. Okay. We did that. You'll get an email invitation from me for a follow-up meeting to today in 2 weeks. We have encouraged everybody to have read the draft sector study. So if there are people who still haven't done that, please do it, okay? It's going to greatly inform your answers to the matrix. All right, so again, I want to thank the people who did terrific work on this. Thank you for putting this together. And we'll see where we are in about 2 weeks, okay?
Okay.
All right. Patrick, take it away.
Okay, let me see if I can share my screen. I'm going to try to be fairly quick here.
You got some time.
Okay, can everybody see this?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So thanks to Lily for bringing this up. It's an opportunity to share just some of the draft elements of our Plan 2040. This is our comprehensive plan, the county's comprehensive plan. Lily had requested that I talk about some of the policy areas that are pertinent to the Annapolis Neck Peninsula. But I'm actually going to back up just a little bit and give a little bit of overall context with what Plan 2040 is overall, and then I'll get into the development policy areas and how they relate to our land use plan. And then I want to get into a little bit of our what's coming down the pipe with subsequent region planning process. So just for context, so Plan 2040, this is the county's general development plan. It's our comprehensive plan. It guides primarily land use in the county, but also tells us how to capitalize on our assets and and conserve our resources. And there are a number of state requirements and guidelines that go into what needs to go into our comprehensive plan, just like there are for the city as they're updating their comprehensive plan. But and similar to with the city, all of our master plans and our development regulations that are adopted by the county, ultimately they have to be consistent with the goals and the policies and the recommendations of this Plan 2040, the General Development Plan. These are the tools that actually implement it. And so that's something that a lot of people, I think, find a little bit confusing about comprehensive plans. They want a comprehensive plan that has so-called teeth. And a comprehensive plan such as this is not regulatory in and of itself. It's primarily a policy document that is then implemented by all of the things in blue that you see around it. Now, Plan 2040 deals with various countywide elements, and long-range land use is really at the heart of that plan. That's what this graphic is trying to show here. So we establish policies and recommendations to guide land use decisions over about a 20-year planning horizon. And the plan will also guide county policy on a number of other topics like environment, how we protect our forests and streams and wetlands, affordable housing. That was something that came up a lot in our public engagement. And so the land use map is going to inform where townhomes and apartments and other forms of housing are going to be allowed. And it'll deal with traffic. That's something that came up throughout the county. It's not just on the Annapolis Neck Peninsula. And so the plan will have goals and policies that will aim to improve safety and provide more viable transportation options. So this is...
Patrick, do you have any examples of the policies that will be in the plan for traffic and traffic safety?
Yes. They are all available online, and I was going to show this online tool a little bit later. But yeah, we have policies. We have goals and policies related to automobile, to our roadways, to bike and pedestrian, and also to transit. So all modes of transportation are addressed in our goals and our policies, and then individual strategies for how to implement those. Does that give you kind of what you're needing? I will say our transportation element too comes predominantly from Move Anne Arundel. That was the work that Martha Arzu McIntosh and Ramon and our Office of Transportation had put together a transportation functional master plan for the county that was adopted, I think, in November of 2019. And so those recommendations have been folded into our comprehensive plan as well. So if you all are familiar with that, then the transportation element will be very familiar to you.
Thank you. No, I really like your graphics.
I actually stole some of those from you all.
Hey, that's what I like.
So this is our basic framework for the plan. And I mentioned last week there is an online, I think we're calling it an online open house tool that presents most but not all of this. And it's still available for public comment. And I'll give you that website in a minute. But just sequentially, the plan sort of walks through first developing a vision for the county. What is the citizens' 20-year vision for the county? And that sets the stage then for everything subsequent to that. We've developed a development policy areas map, which provides a broad framework in the county for identifying areas that are appropriate for a certain range of land uses and public facilities. And then from that, we've developed our planned land use map, and that outlines the anticipated uses over the next 20 years. And like I said, that's really the core of our Plan 2040. And then we have four four areas: natural environment, built environment, healthy communities, and healthy economy, and goals, policies, and strategies underneath all of those. All of that I just mentioned is available for review and comment online now. And some of you may have already visited that website. I hope so. I'll give it to you again in case you haven't. But our final plan, so toward the end of December or September, we're going to release our draft full plan. And that will also include an implementation plan and then performance measures for how we are going to move forward toward achieving the goals of Plan 2040, and then metrics to really measure our progress. But for tonight, I'm really going to focus first on these development policy areas. So this development policy area map was developed in conjunction with our Citizen Advisory Committee. And it broadly identifies, like I said, where development and redevelopment are going to be encouraged and where areas are going to be preserved. Rural areas, areas of suburban character and natural features, where preservation of those areas are going to be prioritized. So this map was developed based on a number of factors, like where there are natural resources, where's public infrastructure, the priority funding area, revitalization goals. And the idea from this is to really have a logical and predictable framework for implementing the goals, policies, and strategies of this plan, and to help guide public investment decisions. So we've drafted 5 primary policy areas and then 5 sub-policy areas underneath the targeted development and revitalization policy area. And I'll really focus on the ones that I've circled in red, because those are the ones that are present on the Annapolis Neck Peninsula.
Patrick?
Yes.
Could I also ask you to touch on a little bit corridor management and transit-oriented overlays?
Sure. Yeah, I can.
Because one question I had that when everyone's looking at how it's developed, and it's a great group, and the citizens group is very good to work with. Kristen Pauley is our representative for our area, and she has been coordinating with a lot of us.
And Ellen Moyer is also.
Ellen Moyer is handling Annapolis, the city, Annapolis.
Right.
I don't, Kristen sends stuff out to everyone out in Annapolis Neck. I was wondering, Annapolis as a city is obviously not in your policy areas, but it greatly, what the city decides to do with their development plans greatly impacts the overlays that the peninsula would want to see.
Yep.
Would there be a chance to look at something like a transit orient? Would other overlays be considered if we had shown that the city was looking at town centers and that kind of thing?
Possibly. So let me talk about what these are, and then I can also talk about the corridor and corridor management and transit oriented as well. And if you feel like that's something that's needed, and that's a comment that can, that we can take in response to this. So the map I showed you here, these are our base policy development policy areas. There is one that's not shown here, and that's the resource sensitive policy area, and that's not shown because it is it applies as an overlay that is in addition to all of those other policy areas, and it's really mapped separately just for graphic legibility. It covers the whole county and would obliterate it if we tried to put it all in one map. But this focuses on areas of natural, cultural, physical features of special concern or significance. And these are areas that are intended for conservation and preservation from adverse effects of development. So this is a map that's put together from several different data sources. It includes streams and steep slopes, wetlands, floodplains, our inventory of historic resources, green infrastructure. So it's a whole range of things that are all on this map. And then, so this policy area, I kind of blew up the Annapolis Neck Peninsula area. So the Peninsula policy area is that dark green. It's supposed to look dark green. Hopefully it does on your screen. These are the areas along the bay. It applies to the areas east and south of the city. And we've defined these as areas that are existing stable communities primarily, but not exclusively residential. And they're nearly surrounded by water and land within a critical area, and often served by a single primary road corridor for access and egress. So that sounds like Annapolis Neck. Development here is to be limited to infill and redevelopment that must be compatible with the existing character of the neighborhood, and where consideration for saltwater intrusion and vulnerability to sea level rise are given. So that's our that's the definition of our peninsula policy area. The beige area that you see surrounding most of the city is our neighborhood preservation area. Applies primarily to residential areas that are south of the city, from Crab Creek all the way over to Route 2. And these are existing, stable, primarily residential communities and natural areas. There may be some local commercial and industrial uses. But again, these are not intended for substantial growth or land use change, but may have specific areas that are targeted for revitalization. So policies for this area will be limited really to infill and redevelopment, or development will be limited to infill and redevelopment. And all of that should be compatible with the existing neighborhood character in those areas.
Patrick, I have a question.
Sure.
There's a distinction here between, as you've just said, between the peninsula policies and the neighborhood preservation policies. But in your description of the policies, they're very similar. And how do you account for what's very clearly an overlap? Wouldn't neighborhood preservation, for example, be important in communities that are colored in here as peninsular?
Well, certainly. I think the peninsula area primarily has additional concerns related to the environmental features, the being surrounded by water, and then that primary corridor. And so policies will be developed, and we've drafted policies that apply to the peninsula policy area specifically, and then some that apply to the neighborhood preservation. And so they are a little bit different, and some of those distinctions really come out in the goals and policies.
Is a peninsular designation in general terms essentially has more limitations on development because it's in a peninsula?
So the definition is that development is limited to infill and redevelopment that must be compatible with the existing character of the neighborhood, and where consideration of saltwater intrusion and vulnerability to sea level rise are given. So yeah, there's some additional layers of information in there, but this is that policy area. Now the town centers, there are 3 town centers designated in Anne Arundel County and have been for decades now. One of them is the Pearl Town Center, and these are defined as compact, walkable, pedestrian-oriented, higher density residential and non-residential mixed use areas. These are always within the priority funding area, and they take the most urban form of character in the county. And these all have a town center master plan that guides development there. Now, Lily had asked about corridor, just for some context, the corridor management area. So you'll see these light purple areas throughout the county, and you'll see on going down Route 2 into Mayo and even a little bit down the Mayo Peninsula. These are corridor management areas, and these are existing developed corridors where, and I'm just reading the definition, opportunities to improve safety and mobility exist. Infill and redevelopment and mixed use are encouraged to serve and preserve adjacent neighborhoods. Corridors link the various components of the community and often form its economic spine, and implementation is guided by a corridor growth management plan. So that's the corridor management area. And the other one that she asked about was transit-oriented development. That's also an overlay that is really applied to our existing or planned transit stations. So those are primarily along the light rail and the MARC rail line in the west and north central part of the county. So so those are the main ones though that are on the peninsula. So
Patrick,
go
I
ahead.
apologize if you covered this already, but what is the difference between a village center and a town center designation?
Village center is much smaller. So the village center applies as an overlay, meaning there are some parts of the county that are within neighborhood preservation, others are within another development policy area, and the village center policy area applies as an overlay, meaning that it's an area where development and redevelopment is encouraged, but much more within scale of the surrounding the underlying policy area.
Got it.
So the policy areas, these are just one criteria among others that are going to help us, or that did help us inform the future land use plan. They were also used to help draft the goals, policies, and recommendations. And some of those goals and policies and recommendations actually get at some of the ideas that are presented in the Peninsula Principles. Things like tracking impacts on infrastructure, tracking the impact on infrastructure of development approvals and rezonings, strengthening the feedback loop to the public on land use and transportation policy impacts. But I did want to highlight this goal in particular, that to support the quality of life and economic vitality in the county's peninsula policy areas while preserving environmentally sensitive areas. So beneath that, there are the 3 policies that you see there, and beneath each of those, there are 3, well, under the first one, there are 3 implementing strategies. Underneath supporting the maritime industry, we have 4 implementing strategies. And then beneath improving the adequacy and safety of critical transportation corridors in these areas, we have 2 implementing strategies. So all of those are available on the online tool, and I can show you how to get to that. I do want to talk real quickly though about what's coming next. So our timeline, we expect that this Plan 2040 will be adopted by County Council probably early next year. And we're hoping to immediately move into region planning. These are an opportunity to really get more tailored planning for the communities around the county. It would be a similar format to what's being done with Plan 2040, with goals, policies, and strategies, a planned land use map, implementation plan. There would also be a citizen advisory committee, a regional citizen advisory committee, and that we would hope would really reflect the diversity of the local communities and help us conduct community engagement for each region. Our schedule is going to be really what you see here. We anticipate about 18 to 36 months to complete a region plan. And Annapolis Neck will be in Region 7 as it's drafted now. So that includes Parole, Riva, Annapolis Neck, Bay Ridge, Highland Beach. That's the Annapolis Neck, or that's the Region 7 region. So stay tuned for more information on that. I mentioned there is I mentioned this last week. If you go to the website at the bottom of your page there, you still have, what, 10 days, I believe, to go through and comment on these elements of this plan as they're drafted now. There's a whole lot more detailed information on all of these, all of the policy areas. I didn't get into the land use plan, but that is the primary thing on here. That's the fifth, what is that? The fifth and sixth tab there. There's a briefing paper that really goes into how we conducted the analysis to come up with our draft land use plan. And there are mechanisms to allow you to comment on all of that. Also on that development policy area map. So Lily, and any of you, if you feel like you want to see some different policy area designations applied to anywhere, you can make those comments underneath the tab for the development policy area map. It is a very dense site. There's a lot of information on here. So I would encourage you please to go look at it and make comments. But it's not something really that you're gonna get out of there in 5 minutes and say, I got it, that's it. I would really encourage you to dig in. There's a lot of good information there. So the next steps of this, there will be a full draft of Plan 2040. So comments on this online tool here will wrap up on September 10th, and we're going to crunch those and then put together a final PDF paper draft of the full plan with all of the background information. That's going to be released in late September for another 30 days of public review and comment. So you can make comments at this stage. You'll have another opportunity later. And then we anticipate introduction to our planning advisory board in October, and then to the council in November. That's our anticipated timeframe. So,
Patrick, it looks like on chat, Claire has a question. How does the county align with the city on the land use plan for Annapolis?
So we did look through. I'm gonna stop sharing. So we did go through our. We did work with the city and look at land use as we were going through this, and we had also given this to you, Sally, I believe, to provide some comments. And I don't know if you've had a chance to do that yet. Those would have gone to Cindy and not to me at this point. But so we should be, I think, pretty well coordinated with land use along the Annapolis Neck and even on the north side of the city as well.
Right, and Patrick came along for the whole Forest Drive sector study ride starting, when did it start? 3 years ago. So he's seen that plan develop and seen the Planning Commission's recommendations.
Okay. Patrick, I have a question, I guess maybe two questions. One is, how is community input, which the county has set up very well, I think, frankly, on the website, how is that loaded into policy development is my first question. And secondly, is there any weighting of policies? In other words, some weighted more heavily than others, more urgently than others?
So in terms of community engagement, our community engagement didn't just start with this tool. We'd been, I guess we started, when did we start this process? Back in 2018, I guess, with, we had a series of 8 community forums, and then another series of 17 visioning sessions all around the county. Both of those had online survey components, and there were separate online survey components. And we visited with some 30 some odd community groups and of different stripes all throughout the process. And so developing our policies and our goals, policies, and strategies really came out of that in conjunction with our Citizen Advisory Committee. We used all of that input to help drive the policies, the goals, policies, and strategies that you see drafted that tool now.
So, just to be clear, when we look at the policies, what you're saying is over this time with all that effort, the policies that we're reading now are reflections of the input from different
Yes.
sources, and that's kind of distilled down. Is that right?
Yeah. This whole process is really a citizen. This plan is to be a citizen vision. That's the vision that I spoke about at the top of the presentation. That's the citizens' vision for what do we want Anne Arundel County to look like in 20 years. That's sort of the starting point for any comprehensive plan. And so from that we kept drilling down and using this engagement to get to the draft goals, policies, and strategies that you have now. In terms of the how did you say the weighting of goals and policies, we are putting together, and we'll be releasing it with our full draft, an implementation plan that includes a timeline for short, medium, and long-term implementation of various strategies. So be on the lookout for that. That's I think what you're getting at in terms of that's how we sort of prioritize implementing those strategies, is which ones are short, medium, or ongoing.
So for example, if you, and I'll just pull it out, let's say traffic mobility was a constant theme that you were getting out of the community. Let's hypothetically, okay, although there's some evidence for that. Would then the way that's weighted in terms of priority is in the implementation plan, they go on the short track. So if we read what's to be implemented first, we should be reading that from the standpoint of my word, urgency, or it carried more.
Maybe also a lens of realistic. Some things just take a longer time to implement.
Yeah.
And so there is that. And then some things are completely ongoing. There are some things that we're doing today and we're going to be continuing to do in 20 years. So
okay,
that's reflected in the implementation matrix.
Okay.
But I will say it's a huge win for community groups to get this peninsula policy overlay in place. I think to Patrick's point, there has been lots and lots of work. It does take a more cautious look at development and compare what is going on with infrastructure planning. I mean, that's the goals. We'll see what the performance measures that are proposed for that type of thing will be. And Patrick, those aren't out yet, are they?
No, that'll come out with the implementation matrix. So you'll get an email about that in late September is when we're hoping to have that full draft ready for comment.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick. That really good. Very informative. Thank you.
Good. Thanks for having me. I hope it's not too much of a digression. I know that this is a Forest Drive specific effort, but this is part of Anne Arundel County, and this is kind of the context for what we're doing.
Well, absolutely. And we've said from day one that, major concern here is the relationship between the county and the city and the planning coordination and looking at things from a comprehensive view. So this was very helpful. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Good.
Is that-
I have one more question on that.
Sure.
Was there any discussion about looking at the city of Annapolis as you would look at a developer? It's from a relationship standpoint. For instance, when your responsibility is all the infrastructure along Forest Drive, and there are major developments that come in, if I'm just the difference in how developments are analyzed or the planning for the infrastructure to prevent the gridlock and things like that we're concerned about. Was there discussion on how to treat city plans if they differ from county plans? Because as you can see, the county is really looking at really a low impact development strategy in Annapolis Neck, and that includes Eastport and Forest Drive sector. So that's my question, is just, was that ever discussed in
well, this
development of this?
This is something, we've heard a lot about needing and wanting to make sure that we're well coordinated with the city and across this jurisdictional boundary. And so there are goals and policies that really, I think, aim to get at that. We are two different jurisdictions, though. We don't our planning does not, and our development approval, certainly we don't control what goes on in the city and vice versa, but we do try to stay coordinated as we're planning. And this is one step. The long range land use planning is one piece of that.
Okay. Anybody else with questions for Patrick? Okay, again, thank you, Patrick. Excellent.
Sure.
Appreciate it. Okay, any other comment or question before we close the meeting for tonight? Everybody know what to do.
Bill, could you just talk for a moment about the overall timeline?
Well, yeah, to the degree that we're making progress on this. Yes, the charter basically for this task force by its terms runs through October. I've been told by two of the aldermen who sponsored this, and by the way, it was passed unanimously, that should we need additional time to complete the report, we would be granted that. I don't see a problem with that, but I think we need to make that determination within the next month. Okay. So just in terms of, in my mind, where we're headed, 2 weeks from now, we're going to look at the matrix, asking everybody to have input in that. Let's look at it together. Let's see if we need more information. What do we need? Let's get it. Okay. If we have enough information to move forward with the draft, I see the matrix input determining as much of a consensus as we can get out of this task force at this stage. Okay. Keep in mind, as members of the task force, this is not the last time you have input. Okay. It's a time when you tell everybody else where you stand, essentially, as to the issues that have already arisen. So we look at the matrix in 2 weeks. By the end of September, depending on what our consensus is in 2 weeks, we should be at a point where we are able to draft a more coherent report. We may need to fill some gaps because we need more information. That's perfectly okay. but we need to start drafting the document and annotating the document. So to answer your question, Sally, in my head, end of October for a pretty, well, final draft that people could say yes or no to, okay? We may need more time. We're not going to wait till the end of October to ask for it, okay? But I think we're going to know by the beginning of October whether we need it or not and how much we need.
Okay, so what I'm a little worried about what we were talking about earlier today about the things that we haven't talked about yet, but were brought up before, and they aren't in that draft report that you wrote in June or whenever you put that draft report together.
Yes.
I'm just wondering how we are going to tackle those, and if we're still feel like those are, if they didn't come up in the work groups, are they still pressing issues, or are they not? How will we determine that?
Well, let me say, yeah, a good question. Let me give you my best answer to that at this stage, okay? First of all, what I had tried to do initially, that initial draft, let's call it the initial draft, which is now at least 2 months old, if not longer, was simply a very first attempt to try to look at the reports of these groups, eliminate repetitiveness, and try to capture the salient points and issues raised by all 4 of those groups. That's what I was trying to do. That was circulated, and people, I think, rightfully said, well, there were issues that were brought up that are not captured in that document. Fair enough. Okay, add them. And beyond that, because this task force operates as a task force, if in this process we are missing something that somebody says, you know, we ought to be dealing with this, and maybe it hasn't been clarified up to this point, I think that's legitimate. Now, ultimately, this task force has to deal with that, okay? So let me say it this way. If here today, there are issues that people think need to be involved in this report relative to our charge on the draft sector study, and it's not clear based on what we've done so far, it needs to be in that matrix. Somebody needs to, whoever thinks that needs to write that down, okay? And I think
we won't have
I think
gotten
it should be
input.
addressed.
If we add something later after now, then we won't have had a chance to get consensus on that item, and if it's still important to the group.
I didn't hear the whole question, but I think what you're asking is, can we still get consensus on it? Let's assume there's an item that's clarified now, okay, or brought up now. Is it possible to get consensus from the task force on the inclusion of that item in the report? I think so. I think so. Okay. I mean, we don't have to tell each other how artificially difficult this has been, given the COVID restrictions and so forth. We would normally be sitting down, talking to each other and bouncing ideas off, and it's much more difficult to do it this way. But to answer your question, yes. You know, ultimately, this task force has to approve a document. So my answer is, I hope to see that document in almost final form, maybe 90% done in October. Maybe all the way done. I don't know.
So I have a question. There were 2 issues that were on this matrix where I was asking for more information, and I may be the only one that asks for more, or there may be a group of people that, you know, want more information. How are we going to handle that? Is that going to require us having a special meeting or somebody to do a presentation on, say, the Peninsula Principles, which we haven't discussed as a group?
Yeah.
How are we going to handle that given the timing that we have?
Well, the first answer is I'm not sure I mean, the honest answer is I'm not sure yet, but here are my thoughts. Okay. Take two examples. Okay. Let's say 5 people in filling out the matrix indicate they need information on the peninsula principles, let's say. And I know that a number of people have also asked for further information on community benefit agreements. Those two things I know. Okay. There are more, probably. The decision then is, how do I get the information to the task force on those issues? Okay. And that can be a combination of things. It can be in writing, if there's a summary that's succinct, that answers most of the questions and so forth, and we can distribute that and then do a either short presentation or summary or whatever, you know, in a meeting, or do a presentation. If one person or 2 people have a specific request for information, you know, managing that, the question is, we have to share the question. So one person gets to raise it and everybody gets to hear it. Okay. But then we just, it's my responsibility along with you guys to figure out how that's addressed. I don't subscribe to every question gets a meeting. Okay. I don't think we need to do that. I think we need to get the information. And perhaps rely on the people who ask the questions in the context of the matrix. Does this satisfy? You know, does this answer your question? You went to the trouble of asking it. Does it answer it as an indicator? So those are my preliminary thoughts, Camille, but I'm open to, you know, ideas. And I thought, you know, just to remind everybody, the idea of this matrix as a mechanism to deal with this, I thought came out of some very creative thinking out of the last meeting. I started out a conversation with trying to get a drafting group together, and I think your collective creativity and kind of getting us where we are is a much better product, is a much better idea. So I'll keep thinking things up and you guys can think of better things, but we're going to get it done. Okay. Any other questions, thoughts, ideas?
Hey, Bill, this is more about getting to consensus with the task force, but who is going to take responsibility to get less active task force members to participate in this step? I just think we need to understand how that's going to happen, because we might need to do more than just send an email to get those that have not participated as much to come back.
Well, as the chairman, ultimately, I think I have that responsibility to follow up and to take that responsibility away from you all. You don't need to worry about that right now.
Okay.
2/3 of the, well, yeah, roughly 2/3 of the membership of this task force showed up tonight.
Okay.
A little bit less. So, you know, it's not like we don't have a majority in these meetings. And we have great input from the people that are consistent. But I have to talk to elected officials, and I will, about this problem. But I want to take that away from the task force. And, you know, you don't have to worry about that. Let me worry about that. And then.
Okay, because I was going to offer that I could reach out to the other, I live in Ward 7, so I could reach out to the other Ward 7 participant to say, hey, we need you to come check back in.
If you'd like to do that, that's very helpful. I mean, that's just getting your compatriot from the same
right
back in the groove here. And if you can do that, that'd be great. But
okay.
Ultimate responsibility for how this operates when some people are fading out, I need to deal with that. So, okay. Anybody else?
Bill and all, I would just want to kind of reinforce some of what Sally was getting at. I think in terms of the time frame, you know, from my perspective, sort of steering the comprehensive plan, the the better we can do to try to wrap this up by October, the better chance we have to sort of wrap things into the comp plan. I mean, that's, I hate to say it that way, but I mean, we're working on a larger time frame for that as well. So I just, it's going to be easier for us to integrate what comes out of the task force into the overall comp plan as well. So we're trying to balance a lot of things with that. And I think the way I see Forest Drive, it connects to a lot of the goals in the comp plan. So I just wanted to kind of provide a reminder there that this isn't operating in the abstract, that this is, I think that was one of the original goals of the task force, was to feed into the comp plan. So
I give you, Eric, thank you for that. And I'm going to give you a lot of credit for diplomatically saying, hurry up so I can do my job. Okay. That's right. I get it.
Yeah, and I mean, for what it's worth, I would just say, it seems pretty legitimate that, people should be able to ask for more information on some of these goals. I think maybe as the chair, I would suggest following up with those people right away and just saying, well, what is it that we need to address, to get more specifics from any of those. So hopefully the working groups that propose those goals have that content. Maybe it just didn't get into the document, and you can kind of just nip those things kind of quickly, but.
Agreed. And I think, as I was listening, I think another thing that might be useful is for me to talk further with you and maybe Sally about time frame from your perspective. In other words, let me hear more about what you need, because this does intertwine. I mean, in the development of the comp plan, the sector study has a role, and the report regarding it needs to be done. So
I also have a question to Eric. We definitely would like all the time. I mean, it's spotty and it's not going as quickly as we would like, but it is a volunteer group, and we did try to do this during COVID. So there's a lot of things that have been working against us, but I think there are some good observations and comments and recommendations coming out of this. But to make sure that they are integrated in the best possible way, could you recommend some format for our final report? Right now, we really don't have, a lot of the recommendations are organized by work group, and we might go into more of a subject matter theme and shuffle some of the recommendations around once they're fleshed out a bit more. So if there are other formats that work to target parts of your document, that would be helpful to us.
No, I mean, I actually think the format's pretty good right now. The main issue in sort of rolling this stuff into the comp plan is that the comp plan is organized around the state of Maryland's required elements for the most. And you just kind of saw those in Patrick's presentation, where you have transportation, you have housing, and you have land use and municipal growth, and you have sensitive areas. And there are elements of this report that feed into, it's not just transportation, so that's kind of that's the main I guess dilemma from my end, is just making sure that this stuff kind of gets into the right place in the comp plan. And we have a goals, performance metrics, and recommendations format for for each of the required elements of the comp plan, the transportation, housing, et cetera. So that's kind of that's the framework we have. And that would follow from an examination of existing conditions, a summary of needs, as a kind of general chapter format in the comp plan. So, I think the way you have it is pretty helpful right now. And there's just as a quick snapshot of our schedule, I was trying to have a draft set of goals, performance metrics, and recommendations by late October, and then a draft comprehensive plan early in 2021, meaning a document, a sort of coherent, believable looking document early in the new year that would then, be provided to the public and others for review and comment. So there's a required 60-day comment period, I understand, for the state to review it. And so that was kind of the intent in terms of our schedule right now.
Good. Okay. All right. Okay. Anything else? Okay, we're going to close the meeting. Thank you, folks, again. And you'll get an email invitation from me. We'll see each other again in 2 weeks. Okay.
Hi, guys.
Thank you.